It's medically impossible for you to have a child. You are suing to prove that your 3-month-old son, Caleb, was fathered by your husband, Mr. Baker.
I was drinking quite a bit. Periods of time I wouldn't remember.
Whether you were intimate with another man or not?
Yes, Your Honor.
I was married, she was married. There's always going to cast doubt on the back of your mind. How do I know she wouldn't do this to me? We did it to each other. And when we did that, we hurt a lot of people. We have 12 children today, but 11 children were deeply hurt because of the actions that we made.
She did it to him, she'll do it to me. If he did it to her, he'll do it to me. Absolutely.
Her marriage before she was with me.
Explain.
The courtroom is quiet, but the air is heavy. A mother has come forward with her young child, seeking recognition, validation, and dignity. She says the child belongs to a man who is no longer alive. A man she once loved deeply, perhaps more deeply than she understood at the time. She wants his family to acknowledge what she believes is the truth. But the man's mother, who sits on the other side of the room, does not believe the child is her grandchild. She says she is only here to honor what her son requested before his death. And now the court waits, focused on one question that carries the weight of identity, grief, love, and legacy. Is the child biologically connected to the deceased man or not? Judge Lauren Lake oversees the case with careful attention, trained insight, and emotional intelligence. Her voice is calm but firm. She has presided over countless matters involving disputed paternity, complicated relationships, and families carrying wounds that go back years. In this courtroom, she does not only enforce legal procedure, she listens to people as human beings. She understands how a DNA test is never just a test. It is a door. Once opened, it cannot be closed. Many people regret taking it because the truth does not always heal gently. It sometimes tears through the life they once believed was real. The mother of the child sits with a tired kind of bravery. There are moments when her face looks older than her years. Pain has taught her lessons no teenager should have to learn. She explains her history with the young man who has passed away. She says he was her first real love. They were young, hopeful, and confused. They were not married. They were not fully committed in the structured sense. Yet, in her heart, she believed he was the father of her child. She recalls their times together, how they talked and laughed, how they shared dreams, even when life around them was unsteady. Next to her sits her own mother, who looks protective, frustrated, and exhausted all at once. She knows her daughter has been judged, whispered about, stared at with cruel expressions. She knows the world is harsh to young mothers. She wants the court to hear her daughter's truth, but she also knows feelings alone are not evidence. On the other side, the deceased man's mother sits with her daughter, who appears emotionally guarded, sometimes defensive, sometimes aching, always holding back tears. Her family has experienced loss that reshaped their lives. Her son was young, full of potential, and tragic circumstances took him before he could build stability in his life. The child the other side claims is his might represent one of two things, depending on the truth. Either a connection that lives on, or a wound reopened. The grandmother says that before her son died, he told her he had doubts. He believed another young man might have been involved. In her voice, there is both sincerity and confusion. She says she does not hate the child. She does not wish to reject her. She only wishes to honor her son's final words and ensure that no one is written into the family history without the truth being proven. She says that if the DNA test confirms the child is her grandchild, she will welcome the child fully. But if it does not, then the mother must accept the truth as well. Here lies the emotional and legal tension that the relationship between law and justice always struggles to balance. The judge knows this type of conflict has appeared in many families. These are the stories that inspire entire discussions on the Game Changing Attorney podcast, or deep reflective episodes in the Divorce Course podcast, where couples and families recount how legal battles reveal emotional scars. These are also the stories featured in Celebrate Recovery testimonies, where pain meets healing slowly, through honesty and accountability. The courtroom is not merely an arena for evidence and legal rules. Sometimes it is like a confessional. Sometimes it is where the concept of justice in jurisprudence meets the real human heart. Judge Lauren Lake understands that. She speaks to the young mother gently but directly. She reminds her that being a mother means representing her child with dignity, even when emotions run hot. She teaches her that expressing pain is valid, but losing control can harm the very child she wants to protect. Then she turns to the grandmother. She tells her that grief does not give permission to forget compassion. She acknowledges her pain, but she also reminds her that a child deserves love, no matter how complex the circumstances might be. The judge is balancing law, emotional awareness, and ethical responsibility all at once. Before the evidence stage is reached, the emotions rise. The grandmother's daughter expresses her feelings about what happened during the time of the obituary. She explains how the obituary was written without the baby's name because they were unsure. She says she could not put a baby in the obituary when she did not know if the baby belonged to her brother. She feared giving hope where there may be none, feared reopening grief that was already unbearable. This moment reveals how decisions made during grief are rarely clean, rarely perfect, rarely free of misunderstanding. This is where the idea of adverse inference in evidence act can quietly echo in the background. When people act during emotionally overwhelming times, assumptions can be misread, meaning can be interpreted in multiple ways. The law allows conclusions from silence or omission, but feelings do not function within neat rules. The judge continues to listen. She does not interrupt unnecessarily. She studies faces. She measures the emotional temperature carefully. She knows that today is not just about determining a biological fact. It is about determining whether two families will be forever connected or separated. In the wider world, stories like this appear in DNA test cheating stories online, where families learn truths that overturn lifetimes of assumptions. Sometimes these tests bring closure. Sometimes they break families apart. Sometimes they build new families. It is unpredictable. The court is told about how the young couple met, how their relationship evolved, how they had been close even though they were not officially committed in a traditional sense. The young mother says there was no other man. She says she has nothing to hide. She says the rumors and accusations have damaged her spirit. She says she wants the truth to be spoken once and for all. Judge Lauren Lake then speaks of the weight of truth. She talks about how truth changes everything. She talks about how this case resembles many adoption stories, full episodes, where identity must be confirmed before belonging can be affirmed. She also acknowledges the legal framework. In cases like these, especially when the alleged father is deceased, the court cannot test him directly. Instead, they must test his surviving family members. This process, explained by experts, allows science to determine relatedness with precision. It is used even in Supreme Court child support cases when the father is unavailable. The science is reliable. The science is impartial. The science speaks without bias. The court is ready. The judge instructs her bailiff to present the envelope containing the DNA analysis. Everyone in the courtroom goes still. The moment feels heavy, like time has slowed down. The future of relationships, identities, responsibilities, and emotional realities sits inside that envelope. But before she opens it, Judge Lake does something important. She reminds everyone that no matter what the result is, the child is innocent. She is not responsible for the circumstances of her conception. She is not responsible for adult conflicts, grief, or unresolved hurt. She deserves love, stability, and dignity. This reminder is not just courtroom procedure. It is justice in a human sense. The courtroom breathes in. The result is about to be revealed. The silence in the courtroom is not empty. It is full of fear, hope, unfinished grief, and the desire for closure. Every person present, from the grandmother, to the young mother, to their families, to the ones watching from the gallery, is holding their breath. Even those who are not directly involved feel the emotional gravity of this moment, because everyone understands, in some shape or form, the longing to belong to someone. The child is too young to understand what is happening, yet everything happening is about her future. Children in cases like these become symbols of truth, legacy, and responsibility. But they are also just children, needing love, care, and stability. Judge Lauren Lake is aware of this. She has seen how adults often fight so hard to be right that they forget the child's emotional world is shaped by the love and unity they either build or destroy. The judge holds the envelope, but before opening it, she addresses themes that go beyond this one case. She speaks about the relationship between law and justice, explaining that legal truth and emotional truth do not always walk together. The law focuses on evidence, genetic markers, legal definitions of family, and responsibility. Justice, on the other hand, involves fairness, compassion, healing, and understanding. It requires acknowledging trauma without letting trauma distort decisions. It requires emotional maturity, but many people enter the legal system while still hurting, still raw, still afraid. This courtroom represents that intersection. Facts must be established, yet hearts must be considered. The young mother listens with a closed jaw. Her eyes are shining because she has been waiting so long for this validation. She is tired of feeling like she must defend her child from whispers, from judgment, from stares that say her daughter does not belong. When she speaks of the pain she has endured, it comes from a place of being misunderstood and dismissed. There is a kind of loneliness in being young and carrying responsibility while others question your truth. She is not only defending her child's paternity, she's defending her dignity. Across from her, the grandmother listens with her hands tightly clasped. Her grief has shaped her more than she likes to admit. The pain of losing a child never leaves. It changes the shape of who you are. She is here today because she promised her son that she would make sure the truth was known. The promise was not made lightly. It was spoken in a moment of fear, confusion, and emotional vulnerability. A mother listens to her child even when the child is not acting from full clarity. She wants to honor him, because honoring him makes her feel like she has not failed in love. Yet that promise also required her to question a child who may be innocent, to question a grieving young mother who, in her own way, lost someone too. Trauma stacked on trauma becomes heavy. That weight is visible in the grandmother's posture. The grandmother's daughter, the sister of the deceased, carries another kind of emotional struggle. She does not reject the child emotionally, but her heart cannot separate the image of the baby from the memory of her brother. When she sees the child, she sees what could have been, should have been, and cannot be. That sadness shows up as distance, not rejection, not cruelty, just sorrow. This is important because emotional avoidance is often mistaken for hostility. Judge Lauren Lake acknowledges this dynamic gently. She explains that grief sometimes expresses itself through disconnect instead of embrace. The young mother's mother sits as a shield. She has watched people talk about her daughter as if they understood her life, her private pain, her relationship, and the circumstances surrounding her pregnancy. She has watched whispers turn into rumors, rumors turn into judgments, and judgments turn into emotional scars. She wants to defend her daughter, but she also knows that courts are not places of shouting hearts. They are places where hearts must learn to speak with clarity and restraint. The judge's presence becomes the anchor. She guides each person to speak from honesty, not aggression. She corrects tone when needed, not to shame, but to protect the dignity of the moment. She knows that when DNA enters the room, the tone must be steady. A DNA test does not care about feelings. It does not care about memories. It does not care about who loved who or who tried their best. It only speaks in percentages, matches, and genetic markers. She reminds everyone of this because many people regret taking these tests, not because the test was wrong, but because they were not emotionally ready for the truth it carried. Yet, the legal system requires truth, especially when the outcome will determine emotional and financial responsibility, potential involvement in child support, family identity, and future relationships. In Supreme Court child support cases and other legal proceedings, DNA results have been foundational evidence. Here too, the DNA results will not only determine the biological tie, they will influence whether the families unite or separate permanently. The courtroom atmosphere aligns with what is often discussed in Truth Changes Everything podcast episodes, where individuals describe that a single confirmed truth can restructure entire families. It also reflects topics from the Game-Changing Attorney podcast, where lawyers discuss how legal cases are not just technical battles, but emotional journeys that shape lives long after the ruling. The young mother expresses how she once believed love alone was enough. When she discovered she was pregnant, she embraced the idea of motherhood. She believed the child would be welcomed, loved, and celebrated. She did not foresee the whispers, the suspicion, the questioning of her character. It is not easy being a young mother in a world that judges quickly and supports slowly. The grandmother shares how losing her son left her with emotional wounds that have not fully healed. The idea of welcoming a grandchild should have been joyful, but doubt stole that joy. She says she could not embrace the child without certainty, because if the child was not biologically connected, she feared it would deepen the pain rather than soothe it. She believed that clarity first was necessary for emotional healing later. This tension reflects a classic dilemma in jurisprudence. Should justice be rooted more deeply in truth or compassion? The law says truth first. The heart says compassion first. And Judge Lauren Lake must balance both. The judge prepares to open the envelope. But before she does, she looks at the child, who is unaware of the magnitude of the moment. The innocence of the child contrasts sharply with the emotional turbulence surrounding her. This is often seen in adoption stories' full episodes, where families are reshaped by truth and acceptance in unexpected ways. The judge reminds the court again that the child did not choose how she came into the world. She is not responsible for the confusion of adults. She deserves love, certainty, and stability. Every person present is holding on to something: hope, fear, grief, anger, love. They are waiting to either breathe freely or collapse under the weight of confirmation. Judge Lake opens the envelope. The courtroom remains silent. The science has spoken, and the truth it reveals will change everything. When Judge Lauren Lake finally reads the DNA test results, there is no dramatic tone, no cinematic pause beyond the natural silence of the room. She reads them the same way she reads every result, clearly, directly, and without emotional bias. Her job is to deliver truth, even when the truth arrives like a storm. The DNA analysis reveals that the child does not share a biological relationship with the deceased young man or his parents. The percentage of genetic relatedness is 0. The scientific conclusion is firm and non-negotiable. The test is not a matter of interpretation. It is a matter of fact, and fact has final authority at this stage. Though the judge's voice is steady, the emotional shock is immediate and visible. The grandmother exhales with a grief that does not look like relief or victory, but something more complicated. The grief of letting go of a possibility. There had been a chance, even if small, that this child could have been a living continuation of her son's life. Now that possibility dissolves. For the young mother, the result lands with force. Her body language shows the hit before any word comes. She believed deeply in her truth. She believed the child belonged to that man. Perhaps because emotionally, spiritually, or in her memory, the relationship felt real and meaningful. But biology draws a sharper boundary. The pain is not just about paternity. It is the pain of having one's sincerity questioned by science itself. This is where truth changes everything in the most profound way. It does not matter who loved who tried their best, or who believed what. Once the DNA speaks, the narrative shifts permanently. The result, for many people, becomes something they regret taking, not because the test is wrong, but because the truth is heavier than they were prepared to carry. Judge Lauren Lake watches the emotional reactions closely. She knows that after the DNA result is read, the legal question is answered, but the emotional process is just beginning. Courts are prepared to resolve facts. Courts are not designed to soften pain. That part must be done by the individuals involved. The young mother's mother places a hand on her daughter, though even that gesture cannot soften the moment. The daughter is not only grieving the result, she is grieving the image of what she thought her family was. She must now face the reality that the father she believed her child had is not the father, and that means the child will grow up without that identity, that connection, that story. It also means she must ask herself difficult questions about her past, her relationships, and her memory. These are not easy things to face. Judge Lake speaks carefully and compassionately. She makes it clear that the result does not define the child's worth. She reaffirms that the child still deserves love, still deserves protection, and still deserves to be raised in an environment where she is wanted and valued. She emphasizes that a DNA test cannot measure love, only genetics, and genetics do not determine whether a child is deserving of care and belonging. The judge also speaks to the grief of the grandmother's side. She acknowledges that they came seeking truth to honor their son. She recognizes that the emotional distance they felt from the child was rooted not in rejection, but in uncertainty and loss. Now that uncertainty has been resolved, but the result carries its own emotional weight. The child is not a reminder of their son, and that may feel like another form of goodbye, a second loss layered on top of the first. This dynamic reflects discussions often heard on the Divorce Course podcast, where families confront truths that force closure. The emotional burden is not easy, but clarity is sometimes the only path toward healing. At this point, the judge emphasizes a concept central to the relationship between law and justice. Legal outcomes do not guarantee emotional resolution. The law can say who is related to who. The law can assign responsibility, but the heart requires time, understanding, and often forgiveness to rebuild harmony. This is where programs such as Celebrate Recovery Testimonies often come in, allowing individuals to process pain with honesty and support. Healing requires space, patience, and intentional reflection. The young mother, however, does not feel ready for acceptance. Her reaction is raw. She feels humiliated, exposed, and rejected. Pain turns into anger, and anger seeks a direction to aim. She directs that anger at the grandmother, at the family, at the situation, at herself. For her, the DNA result does not just end a question, it opens a wound. Judge Lauren Lake understands that emotional reactions of this kind are natural, but warns her that how she responds in this moment will shape how her child understands her story later. A mother's emotional expression becomes part of a child's narrative foundation. The judge urges her to breathe, to step back, to understand that the pain she feels is real, but it must not turn into bitterness. Bitterness does not build homes. Bitterness breaks them. The grandmother clarifies something important. She does not feel triumphant. She did not come to the courtroom seeking to invalidate the child. She came to honor her son's request and to free her family from uncertainty. Now that the truth is confirmed, she expresses that she wishes peace for the young mother and child, even if their lives will no longer intersect with hers. It is not anger that speaks here, it is sorrow mixed with acceptance. Judge Lake asks each family to reflect inward. She reminds everyone that justice has multiple dimensions. In formal jurisprudence, the concept of justice in law is based on fairness, truth, and evidence. But emotional justice is about closure, restoration, and growth. Today, the legal justice has been served. Emotional justice will require time. There is a quiet understanding now settling into the room. The case in legal terms is resolved. The identity of the child's father will need to be determined through new steps, likely requiring future examination of her history and relationships during the time of conception. This is similar to how legal systems approach paternity cases in complex family contexts. The judge advises the young mother that moving forward will require courage, honesty, and openness to next steps in determining paternity and establishing financial and emotional support for the child. This is where adverse inference in Evidence Act becomes relevant conceptually. When information is unclear or withheld, the law encourages clarification rather than assumption. The truth must be established before responsibility can be assigned. Judge Lake explains this to ensure that the young mother understands the next steps are not punishment. They are part of securing a stable future for her child. Though the case has reached its conclusion, the emotional learning continues. The families walk away changed. The grandmother has closure, but not celebration. The young mother has truth, but not comfort. And the child, though too young to understand, has a future that will now be built differently. In this moment, one is reminded that truth changes everything. The courtroom does not manufacture truth, it reveals it. And once revealed, it becomes the starting point, not the ending point. Outside the courtroom, the world continues. But for those who stood in front of Judge Lauren Lake that day, the world they return to is not the same as the one they left when they walked into the building. They carry new knowledge, and knowledge requires responsibility. The narrative ends not in triumph, but in clarity. Families must now move forward separately. Healing must occur individually. Identity must be rebuilt thoughtfully, and the child must be raised in strength, with stability and emotional protection, so that she does not carry the weight of adult pain into her own sense of self. Judge Lake's final lesson resonates. Love is a decision. Truth is a requirement. Justice is the balance between them. And in this courtroom, that balance was honored.